Chapter 10. The water rose swiftly. All around them small trees and branches bobbed like plastic toys in a giant bathtub. At first the trees seemed to float in a random pattern, but as the water deepened, they moved in a single direction. Jonathan realized the trees and branches and other debris were floating toward the setting sun. Once again, Jonathan pictured Magpie Island on a map, but this time he saw it in context with its surroundings. He saw the Tuscan River, not only as it flowed around the island, but as it continued its course due west to the Pacific Ocean. If he had guessed correctly that the earthquake had created a natural dam which caused the stream across the island to overflow, it meant that he and Abby were not in the small section of river that flowed into the lake where they had played sink the ships. They were in the Tuscan itself, the wide, deep river that flowed past Beaverville and Kendra, the two small towns that stood between the island and the coast. Maybe this is good, Jonathan thought. If we can stay on our trees while we float past the towns, surely someone will spot us from shore. I have to go potty, Abby said. Go in your pants. What? Astonishment made her voice shrill. You heard me, Jonathan said. We can't leave our boats, and even if we could, there isn't any bathroom. If you need to go, you'll have to go where you are. You want me to wet my pants? They're wet anyway from the river. Abby was quiet. In spite of his growing fear, Jonathan smiled. No one had ever suggested such outrageous behavior before, and he knew Abby was considering whether or not to take his advice. Dusk was brief. Darkness settled quickly over the island. Their predicament seemed worse, somehow in the dark, more dangerous. They couldn't be easily seen now, either from shore or from the air. I did it, Abby's voice was low. Don't tell Mommy. Mommy won't care, Jonathan said. It feels warm. Moose shifted his feet, slipping on the wet tree. Easy, boy, Jonathan said. Lie still. I want to go home, Abby said. I don't like my boat. I want to go home too, but there isn't any way to do that until Mom and Dad send someone to get us. I don't like all this water, she sounded scared. It's worse than the pool. Jonathan wondered if she had just realized what was happening. I don't like it either, he said, but our boats will keep us safe. Abby began to cry. I have to keep her calm, Jonathan thought. If she panics, she'll forget to hold on. Jonathan started to sing again. Itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Abby listened for a moment and then joined in. If we get out of this alive, Jonathan thought, I will never again sing about the itsy bitsy spider. His hand ached from trying to hold on to Abby's tree in the dark. He couldn't tell how deep the water was, but they were moving steadily now, faster than before. There was more space between their trees and the other trees that were floating, as if the river had widened, making room for its passengers. The songs were the only way to keep Abby from crying. So while his own fear rose as fast as the water, Jonathan continued to sing. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. A larger tree slammed into the root end of Jonathan's tree, jolting him sideways. Moose splashed into the river. Jonathan let go of Abby's tree and grabbed his own to keep from falling off. Moose swam beside the tree. He put one paw up, trying to climb back on, but with no ground under his hind legs to push against, he couldn't make it. Jonathan leaned into the water, put his arm under Moose's chest, and lifted. Moose scrambled back onto the tree. The tree bobbed and jerked. Jonathan clung to it until it stabilized. When he reached for Abby's tree, he couldn't find it. Hold out your hand, he cried. This way. He groped toward her in the dark, splashing the surface of the water. He could make out her shape. She was drifting away from him. He leaned toward her until he nearly rolled into the water. He could not reach her. He unsnapped Moose's leash and, holding the handle in his right hand, flung the clasp toward Abby as if it were flying fish. "Grab the leash," he called. It's in the water. Find it and hold on." "I can't find it." The clasp sank. Jonathan pulled it back and tried again, flinging the clasp toward Abby's tree. That time she grabbed it. "Hang on to the leash," Jonathan said. "It will keep us together." "I'll try." It was easier to hold the leash than it had been to try to hold on to her tree. Maybe, he thought, this will work better. He tugged on the leash, trying to move the tree closer together. "You're pulling me off," Abby said. "Jonathan, quit tugging." "I can't see you very well," Abby said. "It's too dark." "The moon will be out soon." "I want my nightlight." "I want my pink blanket." "I want Raggedy." "I'm going to teach you a new song." Jonathan tried to think about what songs he knew that Abby didn't. The only one he could come up with was the one his baseball team sang on the bus en route to games. 99 bottles of beer on the shelf. He knew his parents would not appreciate if he taught his 6-year-old sister a song about beer. On the other hand, that song would last a long time and keep Abby calm. He changed the lyrics and began, 99 Raggedy Anns on the shelf, 99 Raggedy Anns. If one of the dolls should happen to fall, 98 Raggedy Anns on the shelf. By the time he got to 95, Abby had caught on with singing with him. She didn't know how to count backwards, so she waited for him to sing the correct number each time, and then she joined in. They sang all the way down to 1 Raggedy Ann on the shelf, and then back up to 99 again. His tree was bobbing about less, floating more smoothly. The moon rose, spreading a dim light. Raising his head from the tree, Jonathan looked around. There was water everywhere except for far to his right, beyond Abby. In that direction he saw several bright spots. The brightness was orange and yellow, lightening the sky. Fire! Jonathan counted 5 separate bright areas. 5 fires. The dark outlines of buildings were silhouetted against the fire closest to him. Beaverville is burning, Jonathan realized. There were no other lights, which meant the electricity must be gone. But there would still be people. People would be there fighting the fires. They might even be on the banks of the river, dipping buckets of water to use on the fires. "We're going to call for help," Jonathan said. "Maybe someone on shore will hear us. I'll count to 3, and we'll yell together. 1, 2, 3, help!" Abby's voice joined his, and they screamed together over and over, "Help! Help!" Then they listened to see if there was any response. They heard no answering shouts. Jonathan tried to gauge how far they were from shore. He guessed it was twice the distance from home plate to the center field wall. He was a strong swimmer. He could probably make it. Despite the swift current, Moose could make it for sure. Maybe he and Moose should swim to shore, and then someone in a boat could go after Abby and bring her back. Even as he made the plan, he knew he wouldn't carry it out. He couldn't leave Abby floating down the river alone. She would be terrified, and without Jonathan to distract her with singing, she would probably get hysterical. What if she slipped off the tree or was knocked off? At least if they were together, Jonathan might be able to save her if she fell in. By herself, Abby would have no chance. 1, 2, 3, Jonathan counted. "Help!" They yelled together. "Help! Help!" Their shouts faded into the darkness. Could anyone on shore hear them? Was there anyone on shore? Maybe Beaverville had been evacuated. If so, where were Mom and Dad? They had been headed for the emergency room at Beaverville Hospital, but maybe the hospital wasn't functioning. Maybe the hospital was burning. For all he knew, most of Beaverville was a pile of rubble. The shoreline changed. The glow of the fires faded away like the taillights of a passing car. Beaverville was behind them. Blackness took its place. Mommy didn't hear us, Abby said. We'll try again at the next town. I'm cold. I want my Barney sweatshirt. For an instant, Jonathan was annoyed. What did she expect him to do? Swim back to Magpie Campground, dive under the river, lift the giant redwood tree with one hand, grab her sweatshirt off the hook, and swim back? I'm not Superman, Jonathan muttered. When we get home, Abby said, let's make popcorn. Jonathan's annoyance vanished. She's only 6, he reminded himself. She doesn't really understand what's happening to us. Popcorn sounds great, he said. Jonathan knew there was another town, Kendra, still ahead on the bank of the Tuscan. Maybe they would float closer to shore by then. Maybe someone in Kendra would hear their cries. And maybe not.